Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my new video where we are going to go over 5 tips for Nasus. Now, in honor of me dog sitting this cute little guy, we are going to be doing this champion. Now, if you're new to my channel, I do educational content, I do tips videos, I do guide videos, and I also do opposition reports. And if you're curious about my experience, I've peaked at Diamond 3. I've played a crap ton of Nasus, and I've played a crap ton against Nasus because I mostly play top, mid, and support. And with all these video guys, they're mostly geared towards newer players, low elo people, maybe people struggling to get out of platinum, maybe people struggling to get out of iron or gold or silver. So just keep that in mind. If you're someone that's like a challenger or a masters, you're probably not gonna get too much out of this video. So we're just gonna go over some fundamentals. The dog wants to chase around the cat a little bit. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into the tips. Alright, and jumping into tip number 1, I want to talk about the just insane amount of different rune setups you can have on Nasus, and it should really depend on what you're playing against and your playstyle when you are playing Nasus. A very common build would be having something like a Conqueror primary. This is good if you're against a bunch of tanks, obviously, because it gives true damage and healing. Tenacity is always extremely strong for fighters. Triumph is great for people that might struggle a little bit after getting that first kill to have any major impact afterwards. And then Last Stand is just going to be really strong for Nasus as well, because it when you're really tanky, you have a very big window when you are just below the 60% threshold. Also, if you're against poke lanes, you can always change up your secondary roles, right? You can have a monoflow band, so if you need to max E, say you're against something like Teemo or Quinn or Jace, this setup can be pretty good to get a little bit of early game pressure. Also, if you're struggling against particular all-in champions and you want to go to Conqueror primary, a bone plating can be extremely strong. Poke against poke, second wind is going to be better, so just keep that in mind. Bone plating better against all-in champions, second wind better against poke champions, and then conditioning is better if you're maybe against a tank that has very little pressure on you. Then you can look into the second row. Unflinching is going to be good if they have a lot of CC. Revitalize is going to be very strong if you just need a little bit more healing and want to have a bit more sustain. And then if you think the game is going to go super long and you're just one of those people that love stacking things, Overgrowth can be good. But what I want to recommend for new Nasus players is the grass build, because it's going to be the safest way to just start out playing the champion, because it's going to give you a lot of scaling and a little bit more sustain, and it's going to just be the most forgiving build possible. Also, Demolish is going to be extremely strong on Nasus due to his tower pushing ability. He has one of the best split pushes in the game, so you want to take that. We already talked about this row and that row. So for my what I would do as a go-to build when you are a new player is either a precision secondary with your grass build, and then grabbing tenacity, and then either Last Stand, or maybe you want to go Triumph. But if you're against a champion that is going to poke you a lot and you're going to have to Emax, you might want to grab Monoflow Band or Transcendence. And there's just a couple different ways. I'm just going to give you 3 basic setups. So there's the grass build against very forgiving builds, there's a Conqueror build against a bunch of tanks, and then a Klepto build. Now this is going to be for people that are a little bit more experienced and can really just farm out the lane extremely well. Say you got a really good matchup, you were able to counterpick, you got Nasus into something you felt extremely comfortable into. The Kleptomancy is going to just be a great setup to scale as hard as possible. I'd say magical footwear is pretty big because movement speed is so important on fighters. A little bit more sustain in the early game with biscuit delivery would be my choice there. And then all 3 of these are going to be extremely strong for Nasus. Obviously, the increased cooldown reduction is going to be great. Approach velocity is actually going to be very strong for chasing people down that have your wither on them. And then time warp tonic, giving you a movement speed boost and giving you a bit more sustain with the just the early trades, is going to be really strong. So just keep these 3 different builds in mind. If you have any questions about the builds with Nasus, you can hit me up in the comments. And also, guys, with any of these tips, I am limited a bit with this format of only providing 5 tips, so make sure to add your own if you have played a fair bit of Nasus and you have something that you really want to share that you wish you knew when you started out Nasus. And that will wrap up tip number 1. All right, and jumping into tip number 2, this is going to be extremely important. I think this is the only time I'm going to be giving tips on the early game buys when you are playing a particular champion in any of these tip guides, just because Nasus is extremely important to set him up with a good start early to do well in the late game, because I think that anyone can play a very strong late game Nasus just due to his survivability and his strength in different things. Obviously, what you really want to understand, and that I didn't really cover that well in the runes, is that CDR is extremely important for stacking and for your chase down potential when you are playing Nasus, so you can get off a couple withers when you are chasing them down. So always make sure that you're going to hit that 40% cap, and this is done just several different ways. First up, the Sheen is obviously an extremely strong item. If you're behind, you're going to want to go Iceborne. If you're a little bit ahead, or you're going even, or even maybe just a little bit behind, but you feel like you're in a decent spot, Triforce is going to be an extremely strong build, and that will give you 20%. And then you can grab CDR, you can grab Transcendence if you want, and then you can do the rune that gives 10% more, or you can go a Spirit Visage to increase your healing from your passive and get that 40% max. But that is really important. Now that we have the whole CDR aspect out of from Nasus out of the way, I want to talk about your early game items and what you really want to look for when you're playing Nasus. Now, there are a couple ways to approach the first buy and the first start. It is insanely important to really understand what you're playing against. If the enemy champion has an ignite, you really want to grab an HP item. This is going to help quite a bit in your survivability. You really want to be able to get a CDR item on your first back. So if it's something like a Pantheon with Ignite, you really want to go Doran's Shield, because you're going to get a poke. You're going to get poked quite a bit, and it's going to provide a little bit of shielding towards that Ignite damage because of your low base HPs in the early game. So if you're maybe playing against something that's maybe ranged, isn't really going to all in you too much, but you're going to get poked a lot, you can look at something like either Corrupting Potion, or the Doran's Ring can be extremely nice against those ranged poking people, because it gives a bit of mana sustain, and you can go into the E max and just poke them off the wave and be able to get a little bit of CS in the early game that is so hard to come by when you play against something like Teemo or Rise or something like that. So really think about how the lane is going to play out before you buy your first item. You do not want to fall into the trap of being like, oh, I saw Quas, or I saw Trick2G, or I saw Searches do this Nasus build, or I bought this item first once, and then you build it every single time. So just really try and play it out, have a little bit of foresight, and if it doesn't work, you got to next time try a different item at the start, and it's just going to really help you out quite a bit, because the early game is the most important part for setting up Nasus. And that will wrap up tip number 2. All right, and jumping into tip number 3 for Nasus. Really, when you are able to start fighting back in the lane is when you have your Sheen buy. So your first Sheen buy, and you have level 6. This is going to be an extremely big turning point in the lane if you have a decent amount of stacks farmed up in the lane. So how you want to look to play out the level 6, a lot of people aren't going to understand this, because they're like, oh, Nasus is weak, I need to deny his stacks early, and they aren't going to respect Nasus' power at level 6. So how you want to play these all-ins is, a lot of the times you just want to pretend like you're going up for a stack, maybe hitting some farm around here or here, and they are going to all in you. What is really important with Nasus is you do not want to pop it and then run at people. You want to bait them in if you think that they're going to go aggressive on you, which about 90% of players in low elo are going to do on Nasus at level 6, because they think that Nasus is very weak. And then you want to pop all of your cooldowns after they use their mobility options. So say it's something like a Riven or a Kled, and they use their E or their Qs to jump in on you. Then you want to set up your ult with the Wither, and then you can do all your abilities at the same time. Now, a lot of the times, I don't know what it is with low elo people. Maybe they think that there's some sort of cooldown on using your abilities, just kind of one, then the next, then the next, the next. But you can actually just do a Wither. You can do your Wither and you can do all your abilities at the same time. It doesn't really matter but you can really just maximize a lot of your downtime. You don't want to be like, okay, he's jumping into me, I'm gonna wither, and then I'm gonna press E, and then auto, and then Q, and then R, and then Q. You can press everything at the same time. I don't know what this is. I don't know if anyone else has really seen it, but it's a very common pet peeve that I have when I'm watching a player, is they aren't popping like everything at once when they have a very good opportunity ahead of them and they want to burst someone out just in case maybe a jungler is coming to look and gank your lane. So baiting people in at level 6 is going to be extremely big to set you up in the early game, because that is your first big power spike. Again, it is the Sheen and ultimate power spike when you are playing Nasus. If you have any questions about this in particular matchups, I can help you out quite a bit with that, and that will wrap up this tip. Alright, and I want to jump into a quick couple tips I can give to split pushers. Now this is going to be probably about the early mid game, where I just want to demonstrate a couple things you can do when people are just hiding under your tower and maybe you beat them in a fight or two and they are just falling into a defensive pattern. Say you're going up against something like Shen that you really cannot tower dive under because he has the dodge field and he can taunt and make sure that you get tower aggro when he wants you to. So what the first thing you want to look for when you are split pushing is that your minions have pushed all the way into the lane and it's crashing. This is going to eat up your enemy's time and it's going to free up your time. You want to think of this like a power play in hockey where you have a extra man advantage. There are a bunch of things that are really important to do, particularly for split pushing. The number one thing you should always be looking for are deep wards, so you can get just a lot of vision around the map and you can know when someone's coming to try and double or triple up on you because they know you are winning the 1v1 and they really cannot have a strong Nasus just pushing down their side lanes all game. So wards are going to help quite a bit. Also, pinging your jungler to help and to gank someone out on their red buff or their blue buff or any just really big buff is going to be extremely important. Nasus has really strong chase down potential and can be amplified so much when you are looking for these small skirmishes, because he's not going to get bursted down by, say, an ADC that's in the bot lane at the moment because it's still laning phase. This is just going to be a great spot for you to look for easy kills on a jungler that is going to have access to less resources and is going to be a lower level than you. So you always want to take fights when you are stronger than someone like that, obviously. So this is going to be two of the things you can look to do. Also, obviously, there is the Rift Herald, which is going to be a very strong objective for someone like Nasus that's looking to split push down the waves, get a lot of gold from towers, and do that. Also, you can do the Scuttler, but it will take a while to kill the Scuttler, just due to the fact that you do not have any hard CC that can lower its armor and magic resist. So just keep these in mind. When you have the minion waves pushed in, you do not just want to stand around just walking around idly like just waiting to get ganked, waiting to get two-man. You want to take the power to them, or you want to take the fight to them, and you want to have the element of surprise. When you're standing up here in vision of the tower and your enemy jungler, they are going to have the advantage. But if you're smart, you don't really care about, you might miss one minion in your roam where you're getting extremely important vision that's going to help everyone on your team, and look for objective control and warding. So keep this in mind. If you have any questions about what you should be doing, obviously, a little bit of a caveat with this is if you're able to tower dive, get him out of the lane on a big wave and ping your jungler over, you really want to look for that. Also, other things you can look to do. Nasus is going to be quite tanky. Say someone has a very low threat on you and you can just disregard their auto damage and you can just look to push down the tower. This is always going to be an option as well if you do not have something like a Bramble Vest or a Sunfire. I have no idea why anyone builds Sunfire and Nasus, but anything that would draw tower aggro without you having to hit them, you can look to do extra demolish procs if you feel safe enough under the tower and you have vision of the enemy jungler. The last thing you want to do is throw a 3-0 lead or something like that because you wanted to get a demolish proc, but then the jungler comes and then your enemy laner dives in on you. So those are kind of my tips for split pushing. Also, obviously, control wards are going to be really strong, and the blue ward is going to be a really strong tool that you can get deep vision without actually having to push into the jungle if the enemy team has a strong jungler. And that will wrap up this tip. All right, and jumping into my final tip for Nasus. Now, this is something that I see a lot of high elo players doing, but for some reason, the low elo players haven't really picked up on this too much. But it has to do with your insane ability to sustain with a decent amount of lifesteal at pretty much all levels. I mean, it's going to be a little bit lower in the early levels, but how you want to look to play out trades. If you feel like maybe you're losing a little bit, or you need to kite out an ability from the enemy, you can always look to get a quick Q lifesteal on a nearby minion. Say you're losing the trade really bad and you just wither the enemy, and then you Q a minion. Maybe that gives you a bit of lifesteal, and then you're able to sustain quite a bit up with the slow on them, and then go in for the re-engage and look to fight. So always look to play around your ability to kite people out and sustain. This also works quite well with enemy team fights. If you are playing against a Vayne that is extremely good at kiting you out, maybe they have a QSS for your Wither, and you're really just trying to be a frontline for your team at the moment, it might be beneficial to smack around maybe the Leona that's in the front line and lifesteal a bit off her and kind of walk a bit away from the Vayne and get out of her auto attack range and sustain up a little bit through that. Obviously, you're going to be able to lifesteal quite a bit more with your R because you're going to have more cooldown reduction on your Q. So always look to play out the fights. Do not be the player that just is just like a guided missile. They always just walk in the quickest, just a straight line at the opponent, and then they just live or die by their ability to have a stat check on the enemy when you're playing Nasus. So always look for the small outplays that you can do with getting sustain off minions or lower threat targets while getting out of the high threat targets range of influence and really getting that little bit more health that you need. Or maybe you're kiting out the ADC while your backline's helping you with the front line. It is always going to be very beneficial to you to take full advantage of your sustain. If you have any questions about this, I'd love to help you out in the comments down below. That's going to wrap up my video, guys. If you like the content, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. I'm also going to put a link for my Discord and Twitch if you would like to direct message me about any questions you might have about top lane or League of Legends in general or Nasus in particular. I'd love to help you out. All right, guys, you take it easy.